This is going to be a fun video. In this video, I am going to show you the 5 records that I would use to show off A, my record setup, and B, why vinyl is so amazing when done right. So everyone has those best sounding records in their collection, and honestly, I would love for you to leave a comment with your best sounding records, not the music, but the actual pressing, the way that the medium of vinyl helps bring the album to life for you. I have fallen in love with records that I previously only liked or didn't know that well, specifically because of the high quality pressing. And I just gotta say, these records I'm about to show you are outstanding, and while they may not be my favorite albums of all time, they have bumped up my list of albums I love because of how magical these pressings are. So if this is your first time watching the channel, welcome. Please hit the subscribe button. Lots of videos in the past, lots more to come. And if you're a regular, welcome back. Let's show off these 5 records. So these are all from 2 different labels. They're from Mobile Fidelity Sound Labs and Analog Productions. So Mobile Fidelity Sound Labs, or MFSL, you know them by the original master recording strip that's on the top of a lot of records. That means it's done by MFSL, and most of their records sound phenomenal. Not all of them. Some of them are okay, especially the ones from like the 70s and 80s, but a lot of the modern ones, they really put so much thought into it. It's all analog, it's pressed with the highest quality, the best mastering, the best cutting, and they sound a cut above. Now, before getting into these 5, I will say this. If you have an entry-level setup, if you have a Crosley, if you have even an Audio Technica LP60, or even potentially a Fluance RT81 or LP120, it is going to be difficult to be able to fully discern the quality of these pressings. You'll be able to tell it sounds better than, let's say, a standard version of these, but to really be able to understand the nuances and hear the subtleties, you really have to have a decent setup. You have to have a nice pair of speakers, a really solid turntable with a good cartridge. The more you upgrade your turntable and your setup, the higher return you get on your investment when it comes to these records. There is eventually diminishing returns, though, where if you spend way too much money, like many thousands and thousands, the ear can only perceive a certain amount of things. I think I've hit a really nice place with my setup. I do think that there are still upgrades to be had. I think I can eventually upgrade my speakers. I think I can eventually get a different receiver. And I think that with my turntable, I'd love to move. My turntable is the Clearaudio concept. I'd love to move from a moving magnet cartridge to a moving coil. I think these things will allow for an increase in sound quality and really being able to fully appreciate these records even more. But again, I would not go spend all your money on MoFi and Analog Productions recordings. If you have an entry-level setup, you're just not going to really be able to fully take advantage of it. But if you know someone that has a good setup and you bring one of these over and you listen, it's going to really explain why vinyl is so magical. And these 5 records are outstanding pressing-wise and musically, so let me dive into them. First is Beck's Sea Change. Now, this is probably my second favorite Beck album, my first being Mutations, and I would love for that to get a MoFi or Analog Productions treatment, but who knows. This album is one of the most modern records that MoFi has ever pressed. They tend to do a lot of things from the 60s, 70s, 80s, not so much modern day indie music, although it's starting to get a little bit more. They've done Train, they've done Weezer. I'm hoping that they continue down the road. When it comes to these modern records, I think there's a lot more potential than what we're getting from these standard pressings, and this album in particular really just shows it off. I also got it's the limited pink variant. MoFi doesn't do a lot of colored vinyl, but I will say beautiful pink marbling on this one. I love it. This is not a cheap record, my friends. This is hard to find, and I definitely paid a pretty penny for it, but it is absolutely worth it. Hearing this album on vinyl really unlocked it for me. I always thought it was good, but after hearing it through my system, it went from good to fantastic. It sounds like Beck's in the room with you. Next up, we have Analog Productions pressing of Cat Stevens' For The Tillerman. This is a 45 RPM pressing over 2 discs, so you're doing a lot of flipping. It's like, I think, 2 or 3 tracks per side. So if you're not into that kind of aspect where you have to keep getting up and down, maybe this isn't for you. I know for some albums, I don't really want to go through the process of constantly flipping them over and over again, and sometimes I'll just, out of laziness, default to a single disc version. But if you spread it out over 2 discs and make it 45 RPM, the sound quality is going to be objectively higher. So it really depends on what you want. Do you just want ease of listening to a record, or do you want to get the max audio potential? And with this record, it is worth every time I get up and move, because the music on this album is stunning through this whatever they did for this pressing. I've heard an original press of this and it sounds good. This blows it out of the water. It's not even fair to compare them. It's almost like 2 different albums. Also has a really nice gatefold, and this is one of Cat Stevens' best records. I mean, he has Where Do the Children Play, Wild World, Father and Son, Hard-Headed Woman. Some of his best tracks are on here, and this is definitely an album that I'm glad got the treatment from Analog Productions. If you can track one of these down, I think it is absolutely worth your ear. And I just realized the other three are all Analog Production stuff. I am obsessed with this label. Pretty much anything they do that is an album I know or like, I will buy without question. I know they will be one of the best sounding records in my collection. And 100% of the time, I'm correct. This one being no exception. This is Leonard Skinner's debut, pronounced Leonard Skinnerd. Again, this is a band that I've always liked, not loved. There's a few songs I really enjoy, especially on here. Obviously, Freebird, Tuesday's Gone, Give Me Three Steps, Simple Man. This is one of their best collections of songs. It's a great record front to back. In particular, the cut Tuesday's Gone on here, it really genuinely feels like Leonard Skinner is right there. If you close your eyes and really pretend like they're at a show, it's like they're right there. And I showed my buddy who was always like, yeah, I like Leonard Skinner. They're okay, I guess. And I played this for him, and he said to me, as someone who's not a massive vinyl person, I can't believe how many things I'm hearing in this mix that I'd never heard before that are making me love this song, specifically for Tuesday's Gone. But I mean, Freebird on this too, it just rips. It just absolutely tears a hole in the stratosphere. And this is just such a great pressing, and I would love to get more pressings like this of albums I truly love, like Pink Floyd Animals and classics from the 60s and 70s that really could use this oomph. So I'm excited to see where they go in the future. This one is Norah Jones' debut album, Come Away With Me. So if you guys watched the video where I got my turntable, I had it set up at Audio Element in Pasadena, California, they use this record as a benchmark when they're testing new tables because it really has such prominent vocals and it has such warmth from the music. They're able to know if it's set up properly based on how obvious the kind of amazing sonics will be when it's done right. They use this to test my table, and I remember being blown away by how it sounded. I had to track one down. I did track one down, and unfortunately, nothing against Analog Productions, but this pressing in particular has a few hit or miss copies. My first copy of this had some sibilance. The vocals, when it got like a really high note, it would have a little bit of static or a little bit of like distortion, and it ruined the album for me. It was like, I can't, this is such a vocal heavy album. It's what drives this entire album from front to back, and for me, that was just unacceptable. But I got a replacement copy. I bought another one down the road, and it's flawless. So it really is kind of a little hit or miss with this pressing in particular, but as someone who's a casual fan of Norah Jones, I think this album is a 10 out of 10. It's so beautiful. It's great for any season, any time of year. And this is seriously just one of the best sounding recordings I've ever heard. And last but not least, we have another Analog Productions, Beach Boys, Pet Sounds. Everyone knows this album. I thought I knew this album until I heard this version, and then it completely changed for me. I always thought it was good, but it wasn't amazing. Obviously, there's a couple really great tracks on here that are some of their best. Wouldn't It Be Nice, God Only Knows, etc., etc. It's a really great psychedelic concept album, but hearing it with this level of mastering, it just kind of sent me into another level of respect for it. It's one of the most sonically impressive and powerful and moving albums I've ever heard. This is probably the one I would go to show somebody how amazing vinyl could be. This is like the number one pick for me. Norah Jones is another really good choice for that first listen for someone who's never heard hi-fi, true hi-fi. The thing about this one, it's a little controversial because this is a stereo mix, which means that on both sides you're getting the audio hitting you. It's separated in that way. Brian Wilson originally intended for this album to be mono. So there is another version of this that's 45 RPM split over 2 discs. That's a mono version. Some people swear by it. For me, I prefer the stereo. I'm used to the stereo. I like having it kind of split like that. For purists, they'll say mono's the way to go, and that's objectively the better listen. I think it comes down to personal preference, but what I will say is this. No matter which version you get of the Analog Productions Pet Sounds, you will be absolutely floored. So tell me what I need to get. Tell me the records that sound so good. And again, not about the music. It's about the way the music's presented, how it comes through your speakers, how it hits you in the face, how it hits you in the ears, and really just transforms your listening experience to a step above. Leave a comment with those records, either that you've heard or that you own. I would love to keep adding these amazing records to my collection, because part of the good thing about having an amazing setup is I'm able to hear these little nuances in the records that I know and love, or know and are about to love. That's a really special thing, to be able to discover music in that way. So I'd love to hear more. Please leave a comment, and I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Maybe you'll add these to your want list, try to track them down, and I look forward to chatting with you guys below. So thanks for watching. More coming soon. Take it easy.